with you. I think while the presentation is being loaded up here, I will begin to walk through the impact of regulation on housing here in North Carolina.
Sometimes people mistake Chris and I for brothers.
You have the better mustache.
Hey, I'm doing my part.
Kyle is giving you run for it.
I don't have quite the gravitas, but it's this. I'm hoping this is going to open up. That'll be fun. Alright, what on earth? Sorry, I'm not used to doing it this way. Let's see.
Chris, while we're waiting, why don't you introduce the rest of your team to the folks here?
Wonderful. In our audience, we have our Director of Governmental Affairs, Mr. Stephen Webb, and our new and wonderful General Counsel, Liz Stevens, is in the audience as well. Welcome.
There we go. Sorry about that. And I think you can just, yeah, left and right there.
Excellent. Wonderful. I want to go and ask for your grace because I want to move extremely fast through this presentation in order to give it the overall context and perspective in order to move towards some final solutions for you all to consider as lawmakers. So before we get into the actual impact of regulation on home ownership in this state specifically, I want to kind of give you first a glimpse at the state of the state when it comes to housing prices. So one metric to examine is the statewide median list price for homes. And this is not just your single family detached, but it's kind of a conglomerate of duplexes, triplexes, townhomes. Mostly all of your for sale residential units is in this figure. And as you can see over the last 4 years, we've had a tremendous increase to the cost of a residential dwelling in this state of over $160,000. And so the reason why that's so devastating, and you all can feel it, your constituents can feel it, is because if you look at that $400 and nearly $20,000 mortgage, and even if you have constituents that, let's just say, has 10% down, a little over $40,000 to put down on a mortgage, the required household income for traditional financing shakes out to be around $130,000 to qualify for that mortgage. It's a very devastating figure whenever you consider that the median household income in this state is not even $70,000. So the result of these figures is what you can all feel and your constituents can feel, and that is it is estimated that the average North Carolina family cannot afford the median price residential dwelling in this state. Now there's a lot of impact on what's driving home prices, but as you all know, because of the strong economic policies that have been put forth by this legislature, there is a high demand to be in this state. And as a result of that demand and lack of inventory when it comes to housing, you have a tremendous increase in price. And the inventory lack can be shown into a recent study that was commissioned by the Chamber, the Realtors, and our association collectively from Dr. Walden with NC States, established here in a recent model that we need over 700,000 residential units to begin to close the housing gap in this state over the next 5 years. It's tremendous. So before I get into solutions that this committee and the state legislature at large can consider in order to address this affordability crisis in this state, I want to kind of give you perspective about what we're facing. And so, if you will, just imagine for yourselves that you are a residential developer that seeks to provide affordable housing in your district, both for your family, your friends, and for your fellow constituents. So I want to walk you through the process of what it takes to deliver that product for your constituents. So one of the first things you're going to do is check the zoning of the property. And specifically, it is what the local government has designated as the allowable density which you can build, and the phrase is by right, meaning that you have the right to build per the local government's planning and zoning map. And the question that has to be asked first is that, can the current zoning density yield a price point that families in your district can afford? If not, it's devastating because you have to go through a rezoning or a conditional zoning process. And you may think that it's a simple process. You just need to show the local government that you conform with their comprehensive plan, that you're going to build to their ordinances, you're going to provide the setbacks that they want, and you're going to check all these boxes. But that's not the case. For you to get more density from a local government through the conditional zoning process, you must negotiate with them. The issue with these negotiations is by way of current statute, the phrase voluntary consent has it where even items that you all as lawmakers prohibit from local governments being able to regulate, that they're on the table for conditional zoning discussion. So in exchange for more density, you may have to voluntarily consent to even prohibitions that the General Assembly has established. So one of those are aesthetic controls when it comes to the type of material you build with your houses, how many bedrooms that you build, and so on. Not only that, there are items where the court have established that it's unlawful to require, for example, you to pay into an off-site traffic fund for your traffic impacts that's not proportional for the impact of your development. Through the conditional zoning process, that's upended because you have to voluntarily consent at times in exchange for more density. This is one of the most devastating processes that you will experience in trying to deliver affordable housing for your constituents. And we want to work with local governments on reforming this process so we preserve conditional zoning, but we do so in a way where we only have negotiations on lawful conditions that can be voluntarily consented to. And this is just not hearsay. This happens all across the state. It's not just a one-off project. On average, most of the time, you're going to go through a conditional zoning process. It is very rare that we see somebody able to achieve an affordable density by right zoning. So this is usually the process that you're going to have to go through if you're going through this illustration with me to deliver affordable housing. Just this last week, a local government in this state has met and they established a list of conditions that you must voluntarily consent to in exchange for getting more density. So in terms of contractual aspects, whenever expectations are published, you really lose the heart of voluntary consent. With that said, the expectations that they put forward for the list of conditions include prohibitions that are otherwise unlawful. So this is very devastating to affordability. You may be asked to put a multi-use path through your property. You may be asked to set aside a property for a park. You may be asked to pay into a utility fund that's not proportional to your development. You may be asked to buy fire trucks. You may be asked to do all these things in exchange for voluntary consent. And again, this is very devastating, not only to the time frame to deliver the affordable product for your constituents, but also it's devastating to the affordability as well. So say, for instance, you made it through this process and your project is still alive and it's still affordable. You need to check your environmental constraints next. Do you have any streams, creeks, or ditches on site? If so, there's riparian buffers that protect those areas. You must stay out of those. Is there wetlands on the site? If so, you need to get your state and federal 401 and 404 certifications. Is your site near or around a floodway or floodplain? If so, you need to maintain your vertical separations from your structures from the base flood elevation levels. Is your site in a coastal county? If so, it's subject to the Coastal Area Management Act, which has very strict regulations, and you're also subject to more stringent coastal stormwater requirements. Is your site in a protected watershed? And there's many areas in the state that are within protected watersheds. If so, you've got increased density limits on you, increased stormwater requirements, and increased buffers. So concurrently throughout your due diligence process, you're also going to look at whether you have water or sewer available to your site. And if you do, it's a blessing. The next aspect is that does the water and sewer provider have capacity? Do you need to do an on-site pump station in order to pump to the nearest connection? Do you need to upgrade an off-site pump station to provide additional capacity? Does the water system have the pressure and flow necessary to meet the fire flow requirements for your development? If any of these questions are no, then that's very costly to the affordability of your project. If these measures can't be met, then maybe you can make your project work off of on-site wastewater, septic, or wells, but there's additional setbacks and soil conditions that are necessary. You also want to concurrently look at whether your site's going to warrant any transportation improvements, whether state or local. This can be very devastating, even not contingent to your property. Sometimes you can be forced to, or very often you're forced to upgrade intersections, build turn lanes, all kind of aspects associated with the impact of your development and beyond at times. This is a significant time sink and is extremely costly. Now you've got through all that, now you can begin your permitting. Now, even though you may have handled your rezoning already, you still need to go through certain administrative approvals with your local government, which includes site plan, your plats, if there's any floodplain requirements you must meet, and if the local government is enforcing a tree ordinance, you've got some mitigation and survey requirements there. You got to permit your roadway and utility crossings. You must also apply for your state or local sedimentation and erosion control permit before you can disturb the property. And even after you got that, you need your federal construction stormwater permit before you can break ground. Then you've got to get your post-construction stormwater permit from the state or local government. You also need to get your DOT driveway permit to be able to connect your development to DOT's right-of-way. And then for your utility encroachments, you also must permit those as well, because you're going to be encroaching in the right-of-way to make those utility connections. And of course, if you've got any off-site traffic improvements, you've got to design and permit those as well. You've also got to design and permit your on-site or your wastewater and water distribution systems to the standards and specifications set by the utility provider. Once you've achieved their approval, you can then submit to the state for state water approval and state sewer approval. At this point, just to get to the point where you can break ground, you can't begin to go vertical yet and build the home, but you can start to disturb the property that you're looking at. And what we're seeing is that if there's no rezoning required, no traffic improvements, no utility issues, the fastest that we're seeing pretty much on average is at least 18 months. Most normally, if you get kicked into any type of those other parameters, you can at least add a year to your project or more, and we see it being more in a lot of cases. The critical path on a lot of these permits are 9 months and beyond, and that's assuming you don't have issues with your rezoning. We've seen rezonings last multiple years, 3-4 years at times. So now you can break ground, your site work, put in your erosion control measures, install your utilities, put all your roadways and sidewalks in, and all your other amenities for your development. Through this whole process, you need to do extensive monitoring, reporting, as-built surveys. You got to bond all of your construction aspects normally, and all with the goal to get final certifications and sign off so you can finally start building your homes. But you can't build yet because you first need to get your local government plot plan and site plan reviews to make sure that your buildings, your homes are fitting on the properties with the proper setbacks and different aspects. Then you can request your building permit after that's been approved, and once your building permit is approved, then you begin breaking ground, going vertical with your home through various periodic inspections, all with the goal to finally get a CO so you can deliver the home to your home buyer. So total time we're seeing, and this is highly variable, I'm assuming here good weather, timely inspections, timely permit reviews, efficient supply chains. You're not waiting 9 months for windows or cabinets. We're seeing that the best case scenario, you're over 3 years. Normally, you're over 4 years. So going back to Dr. Walden's point of over 700 residential units that are necessary over the next 5 years to meet the housing gap in the state, you're talking that this is a titanic steering aspects to meet the inventory demands. So hopefully that paints a picture of what it takes for if you are on a warpath to provide affordable housing for your constituents in this illustration of you being a builder and developer yourself. But one of the things I want to highlight of the importance of this committee, because of financing requirements, the dollar value that you have to pay for all of the impacts to your land whether it's going through the conditional zoning process, whether it's utility upgrades, whether it's offsite traffic improvements, every dollar that affects the price of the lot is a $4 multiplier to the price of the home. This idea that, say for instance in this scenario, that it costs you $100,000 to deliver a single lot, you thought, well, Chris, I'll just build a $100,000 home, sell the whole package to my community as $200,000, and everybody will be good. But that's not allowed with traditional financing aspects. The land value can be no more than 20% of the cost most often. As a result, in order to, if it costs you $100,000 for that piece of land, you at least have got to put a home on that piece of property that will appraise for $400,000. So this is why the affordability issue is so directly tethered to everything I've went through in regard to conditional zoning, abuses, all these different aspects. So I want to provide you guys with solutions where you can help with this. Very quickly, top three, we've got to facilitate efficient permit review timeframes with everybody who's involved here. We've got to be timely, we've got to be responsive, and we've got to move through the process in order to protect our land, air, and water and other aspects to the best extent possible. So efficiency is really key. The next two items are linked together, and as you can see that this is really a part of this whole discussion, this session about downzoning, is that often the reason why that in regard to the example that I gave you of you trying to go through this process to deliver affordable housing for your constituents, if that the base zoning didn't work, you're going through a conditional zoning process. And if how the abuses happen through that conditional zoning process, that's often first triggered by downzoning the property first, where the base density won't work. So this is all related to the conversation this session on downzoning, which we hope to be a part of a solution for the legislature on. So we believe we need to reform the downzoning and the rezoning and conditional zoning process to only have lawful conditions. So it should be a part of increased density negotiations. And also too, we need to establish high base density around urban areas and reasonable base densities in our more rural areas where you can do this by right and not have to go through a conditional zoning process. And we believe by looking at high density areas differently than rural areas, it will help us to protect against urban sprawl while we're also working to preserve farmland, all aimed to address affordable housing for more North Carolina families. For the record, here's some more solutions that are greatly needed that you guys can legislatively consider, but for the sake of time, I will not go through those, but happy to discuss any questions you may have, and thank you so much for this opportunity to share today.
Thank you, Chris. Great information. Questions or comments from chairs? Questions or comments from committee members? Representative Dove.
So I get all of what you're saying. I went through a permitting process for a sidewalk recently, and what I learned was that, you know, you have the same person all the way along, but each person reads things differently, and each person has 50 plans that they're supposed to, you know, I'm a little worried about the shot clocks, because that even a city as large as Raleigh doesn't have enough employees. I can't solve that problem, but so if we put a layer on top of them to force them to respond, then how is that going to help? I mean, safety and those kind of things. How is that going to keep? I understand that this is a huge problem. It took me 4 months to get a permit just for a sidewalk. I get it. But I'm just worried about putting more pressures on our cities and how we can do that.
I think Representative Zinger wanted to say
Chair
something.
Zinger.
Sure. You know, I think one of the things why it's important and why we need to have shot clocks and that kind of thing is I find in my experience in building, I've been in the building business for 30 years, is that we have folks, our laws require us to have professionals do all this design stuff. So these site plans and stuff are designed by licensed engineers. The law says that the engineer is the person who has all financial liability. The only way that changes is if the contractor doesn't do what the engineer said. The problem is I feel like we have folks approving or reviewing that stuff that are going into all kinds of rabbit trails that aren't really as necessary. You know, here's the thing is you can't, if you're in business, you can't build a terrible product and make money. Okay, name me a company that builds something that's absolutely horrible and is just killing it. It doesn't work. That's the beauty of capitalism. At this point, we have so many requirements for professional and professionalism in the building industry, I'll speak specifically to, that's not a problem. We just are gumming up the works. And so a lot of it is just, we just need to get out of the way and let the professionals roll. That doesn't mean that we don't have a approval process, but we don't need to have it be so arduous, if you will.
One more question or comment from Representative Stevens, final word to Chris, and this committee will be adjourning at 10 minutes till.
Thank you. And I'm sorry, I just think sometimes too, as a state, we get in the way. I know that some agency came around and told my county government they had to increase the size, the density of lots. And so instead of a half an acre, they're now demanding that you have an acre to put a single house on. And that's crazy. My parents had 3 houses on an acre and a half that, you know, clearly could serve that. And then they explained the problem was there were people with half an acre that would put a trailer on for this son and a trailer on for that son, and now they want to sell them all. Well, they can't do that. So, I mean, there is some logic to it, but then we also have ourselves saying, we got to get you a bigger lot size, so we can't build a house.
So former Representative Millis, last word.
Yep, well said, Representative Stevens. And but just real quick back to Representative Dahl's analogy. Now, we have a track record of working with agencies in regard to shot clocks, and one of those was last session working with DEQ in regard to stormwater permits. And there was in the Wilmington Regional Office, there was times where a stormwater permit review was taken north of 9 months very often, and as a result, you know, without sacrificing safety or environmental protection, we work with them in order to, one, not allow these shot clocks to be reset by incomplete reviews. Whenever you have one reviewer reviewing it partially, the shot clock resets, you submit back, and then they have additional comments that were missed upon initial review. But we also did this with increased revenue, so the agency could address workforce issues, and so we can meet the timeframes as well. And so we're open-minded to all those things, but it's important to prevent these abuses for shot clocks being reset without incomplete reviews. But we've had a track record of working with these entities in that regard.
All right, thank you very much, Chris. Okay, next up and last, again, I said we're going to be going till 10 minutes till to get everybody a chance here, trying to condense our schedule and get as much as we could in with the lost week of last week. Next up will be Bill Peasley. He's legislative liaison. We had a Mr. Liebman supposed to be here with us. He couldn't make it, but thankfully Jeanette Duran, who is Rules Review Commission Chair, will also be here from the Office of Administrative Hearings.